Welcome to the Cake Academy podcast, the podcast for cake makers who want to raise their standards, price with confidence, and build a business that actually works. I'm Cheryl, cake business coach and founder of Cheryl Bottomley Cake Academy and Tier & Co cake management software. And each week I'm going to be sharing honest conversations, practical strategies, and real industry insights to help you move from simply making cakes to running a profitable and sustainable cake business. So if you're ready to stop undercharging, stop second guessing, and start building something stronger, you are in the right place. So let's get into today's episode. So if you've been following along with this series, you're going to know that we've spent a lot of time talking about visibility and the different ways that people can find your business. And in episode 6, I mentioned that one of the most underrated visibility channels for cake makers is supplier relationships and venue recommendations. And today I want to give that topic the full episode that it deserves, because I think it's one of the most powerful and most overlooked ways to grow, specifically like a wedding cake business. And unlike social media, it doesn't require you to show up every day. It requires something totally different, which is all about genuine connection. So let me start with why this matters. So when a couple books a wedding venue, for example, one of the possible first things that venue will do is give them a list of recommended suppliers. So photographers, florists, hair and makeup artists, cake makers, and that list carries enormous weight. The couple trusts the venue and they've already spent or going to spend a significant amount of money there. So when a venue says, this is who we recommend, most couples will generally reach out to that supplier list first. So if your name is on that list, you're not just being found, you're actually being vouched for. And that's fundamentally different to, for example, an inquiry to someone who I suppose like stumbled across your Instagram, because it naturally comes with trust already built in, which also means it converts far more easily into a booking. Now, the same is true for referrals from other wedding suppliers as well. So, for example, like a florist, a photographer, or a wedding planner, or a venue stylist recommends you to a couple they're working with. That recommendation is worth more than almost any amount of social media activity, because it comes from someone the couple already knows and trusts. Okay. So, who should you be building relationships with? So, wedding venues are the obvious starting point, particularly if wedding cakes are a significant part of your business. A venue holds, so like, I don't know. So, for example, if a venue holds like 50 weddings a year and then puts your name on their recommended supplier list, it has then potential to send a steady stream of inquiries your way for years. Florists are another strong connection. Florists and cake makers often work with the same couples, and there's a natural alignment between what you both do aesthetically as well. So, a florist who loves your work and knows that you're reliable will mention your name or your business name. There's wedding photographers as well. So they spend more time at weddings than almost any other supplier. They see everything. They know which cake makers produce work that photographs beautifully and which ones are professional and easy to work with on the day. And photographers obviously talk to couples who are still in the planning stage. So their recommendations matter as well. And then you've got people like wedding planners and coordinators that are another valuable connection. They're essentially curating an entire supplier team for their clients, and they need a cake maker that they can rely on and recommend with confidence. Now, you might also think about bridal boutiques, hair and makeup artists, other event suppliers who work in the celebration space. And the wider your network of trusted connections, the more routes there are for inquiries to find their way to you. Now, You're probably wondering how you actually build these relationships. So, what I want you to understand first is it's not about, I suppose, approaching suppliers and then just asking for referrals. That approach rarely works, if it does at all. And it can feel um, like really transactional and quite off putting. You know, if I think about me, if another supplier just randomly contacted me and said, "Would you recommend me to your customers?" I'd be like, "Who are you? What's this all about?" You know, that kind of thing. So, you know, don't do that basically. But genuine supply relationships are built over time through that trust, the consistency, and that mutual respect. So it's a good idea to start by identifying the venues and the suppliers in your area that align with the kind of work you do, because not all of them will. And this is a really like good point as well. You know, just as an example, if you want to make really big, elaborate cakes, for example, you probably don't want to be building relationships and reaching out to venues that hold 50 people. Because why would you do that? It's not the type of cakes that you want to be making. So you do need to do like your research and just make sure that those suppliers really align in with the type of work that you create and also the type of obviously customer that you want to attract. And you don't need to know everyone. A small number of strong, genuine relationships will serve you far better than a large number. So then I want you to think about how can you add value and show up as someone worth recommending? So, you know, share their work on your social media when you collaborate. So I do this, so what I'll do is I'll do it in my stories. So just to give you an example of this, there is a bridal shop that does fantastic social media in my local area. It's brilliant. So what I've done before is when I've seen that they've got a sale on in their boutique, I'll post it on my stories and link it to that particular supplier. And that's how it works. You know, you need to be doing it both ways. Um, you know, and like I say, like other things that you can be doing is tag them in photos from weddings that you've been part of. You know, always be professional and reliable every single time. You know, if anyone like tags you in any posts as well or messages you, you know, reply promptly, deliver as promised, and be the kind of supplier that makes everyone else's job easier on the day. And it's also worth saying that this, like I said, this works both ways. So like for example, when couples come to me, I often recommend like florists, venue stylists, and other suppliers that I know and trust. And that is part of being a well-connected professional in the industry. Um, you know, I might just be having sort of like a general chit chat with someone that I don't know. It might be someone that's come and picked up a sample box from me, and I'll say to them, "Oh, you know, what else have you? You know, do you need to sort of like sort out for the wedding? How far have you got? Have you got much more else that you need to do?" And like the amount of times someone said, "Oh, I haven't booked my florist yet," so I've given them like different florists, like details. So you know, and it really sort of like cements that you are professional in the industry as well because you know all those other suppliers. And also, when you refer suppliers to your couples, obviously those suppliers notice as well and they appreciate it. And it builds that kind of mutual trust that makes them far more likely to recommend you in return. And the most valuable supplier relationships are the ones where both sides are actively looking out for each other and not just receiving. So that's a really, really important part. So reach out personally and introduce yourself, not with a pitch, but with a genuine connection. Let them know that you admire their work, mention a wedding that you may be both part of, or you could simply express that you'd love to connect. You know, people recommend people that they like and they trust, not businesses that they've just received like a cold message from. And where possible, obviously, attend industry events. You know, there's things like wedding fairs, supplier open evenings at venues, and where you're likely to meet other professionals in person. And that face to face connection, honestly, it just matters so much in an industry built on trust and personal recommendations. You know, I've got suppliers that I just message because we've built up relationships, I message them sometimes just out of the blue. They might message me just saying, hey, how are you doing? Or I've not seen you at such and such venue for a little while. And we just build up, those really beautiful like friendships, if you like. Now, supply relationships, I am going to say this, does take time. You're not going to reach out to a venue today, generally, and be on their recommended list by next week, or have that relationship built with the supplier like next week. It's just not going to happen. But if you're consistently producing your beautiful cakes, you're conducting yourself professionally, and you invest in genuine relationships over time, you will start to see the results. One venue referral can lead to a booking, and that booking leads to a photographer tagging you in a beautiful image. That photographer recommends you to their next couple, and so it builds and builds and builds. And this is one of the reasons established cake businesses can continue to receive inquiries even during quieter periods, like on social media, for example, which is what we touched about in episode 7. Because relationships are doing quiet, consistent work in the background. Now, one of the things I want you to do is track where your inquiries are coming from each month. It is so, so important. And we did discuss this in episode number 5, because over time, you are going to start to see which relationships and which venues and other suppliers are sending you the most business. And that tells you where to invest more of your relationship building energy as well. Now, if you're using Tier & Co cake management software, there is actually a dedicated section called Connect and Grow, where you can keep track of the suppliers that you work with. And there's also a section in there that gives you some tips in terms of how to engage with them and following up in the right moments. And it keeps all of your supplier relationships organized in the same place as the rest of your business, so nothing gets forgotten about and connections don't go cold, basically. And that's one of the reasons that I built it in there, because it's so, so important for your business. So building a network of trusted supply relationships is one of the most sustainable things that you can do for the long-term health in your wedding cake business. And it does take time and practice, and it takes genuine effort, but the return, it builds that trust, and it brings you those inquiries in that convert easily, and it's well worth it. Now, if you want to have a look at Tier & Co cake management software, you can find all the details in the show notes, and you can sign up for a 14-day free trial and go and have a look in the app and have a look at the Connect and Grow section, because it's so, so useful. And this is just on top of everything else that's in there. So if you've got any questions, please do ask, and I will see you next week in the next episode. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Cake Academy podcast. If today's episode gave you clarity, challenged your thinking, or helped you look at your cake business differently, make sure that you check the show notes below for any links, tools, or resources that's been mentioned. If this episode helped you in any way, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it with another cake maker. You can leave a rating, or you can write a review. These simple actions make a real difference and help more cake makers find practical, honest guidance for building a stronger business. You can also watch the full episode over on YouTube, where I share the full conversation and any visuals that supports today's topic. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next episode.